Sorry guys for the delay. Let me just switch on the attendance first. Okay, so I have switched on the attendance, so you can start marking your attendance. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good morning. So I have only 8 attendances till now. Okay, people are still joining. So you guys can start with the attendance. Let me just put it on chat. Good afternoon, Gaurav.
Meanwhile, I had a doubt about
Go ahead.
GUI and UI.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. About GUI and UI, sir.
So
What are
GUI is
they?
basically, I mean, so essentially it's like this. GUI stands for graphical user interface. This is essentially whatever we are doing right now. All of this is graphical user interface. User interface can be either graphical or let us say through command line. Okay. So UI stands for, sorry. Okay. So UI essentially it can either be through command line or through these mouse and keyboards and everything, right? So graphical user interface is basically a kind of user interface, the way in which you take input from your users, okay, and show the output to the user. So whatever we usually do, for example, uh, if you, I'm not sure whether you guys have even seen any of MS DOS. Good afternoon, everyone. If I'm not sure how many of you have seen MS DOS. So MS DOS used to be an operating system in the Windows arena before Windows came. So this was from Microsoft. So MS DOS was a command line based operating system. Windows is a graphical user interface um, where you use uh, okay, good. So at least some people have seen MS-DOS. So basically, in Windows, we use this mouse and we, it's much more interactive. You can click anywhere on the screen. There is another version now, so you can have touch screens. Okay, so touch screens is the next level of user interface, where not only you have mouse, but you also can simply touch on a place on the screen. So these are all different types of user interfaces. So, GUI is the word which is used to basically talk about any user interface that has more attributes, okay, which is more vibrant, where you have a lot of things on shown on a screen, and user can go and click anywhere. Command line interface is more restricted interface. At every instance, you are supposed to type a command. Okay, so basically on a command line interface, you do not need a mouse. You simply use a keyboard. If you want to use a keyboard as well as a mouse, then you need some kind of a graphical user interface. Now the term UI, essentially, even though it is technically wrong to use the term UI for GUI, but usually when we talk about, uh, there are so many imperfect things that we talk, right, in whenever we talk. So the actual term that we should use is, user interface is something that could be GUI or command line. But normally when we talk about, we just sometimes, we skip the G and we say, okay, its UI is bad. It essentially assumes that it is a GUI, but it is bad. So this is the problem. The technical term is GUI. Sometimes when we are, speaking informally, we use the term UI to be interchangeable with GUI, but technically they are different. Technically, a UI could either be command line. Uh, there can be others. I'm not sure what are the things that are going on in the. So you have this design club, right? Talk to those guys. Okay, they will tell you what are the different types of user interfaces that you have. Okay, they'll be probably a much better person to tell you. This is something that the design guys will be able to tell you better. But as of now, in our case, whenever we usually use the term UI, it generally means GUI, even though it is technically incorrect. And whenever we want to talk about command line interface, we simply say CLI, command line interface. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Please mark your attendance. I have 58 responses till now. I'll hope everyone else will to do that. Okay. So the idea of the teaching from here onwards is that we are going to have what are known as shepherding sessions. In the shepherding sessions, we will essentially pick 4 or 5 people from the audience. They will be made the shepherds. And from the previous lecture, I realized certain mistakes that I was doing, so I will be much more, what I'll do is, I'll actually try to guide your discussion in a much better fashion. So what I will do is, I have a simple word file in which I have written some questions. I will share my screen, and you all can see those questions. So what the shepherds are supposed to do is they are supposed to discuss these questions among themselves. Okay, so it's like, let us assume that someone has asked this question. So our shepherd is basically our expert panel today, and the expert panel is being asked to answer certain questions. And what are those questions that I have written in a word file? So they will basically start answering those questions. Anyone in the shepherds can answer. Try to make it evenly distributed. Okay, one person should not take too much of space while speaking, or one person should not always speak, something like this, right? So you have to distribute it among yourselves. So you have to learn how to do. This is a part of your professional communication. You should probably learn this is the practical probably for your professional communication course. So here I'll pick some 4 people, and those 4 people will they will discuss it among themselves. uh, is the whole concept of shepherding clear to everyone? If you have any queries, please tell me. I will tell you what it means. By the way, the rest of the audience, um, they are free to stop a shepherd. In fact, this is the whole idea of it, that the shepherds will discuss the learning from the last week, and everyone who has any doubts which are not yet cleared. Okay, I even though I tried my best to answer to everyone over email even 10 minutes back. Okay, the idea is that before the lectures, try to get your doubts resolved. But in order to do that, you'll have to watch the lectures on time. And this is the idea. From next week onwards, try to watch the lectures as quickly as possible. Note down your doubts. Maybe the first thing to do would be to just ask those doubts to me. I will try to answer them. But if there are any more doubts that are still left, this is the point. Okay, your peers, your friends are now going to discuss it. I will just be a mute spectator, and they are going to discuss it. You can ask your doubts to them. You can either put it on chat. I would prefer that you don't do it on chat. You unmute yourself and ask, because we will put the recordings of this on the YouTube channel as well. So these discussions should help you. Okay, so your discussions can be seen by the IT plus batch, and IT plus batches discussions can be seen by you. The idea is, if a particular topic, if a particular doubt gets discussed in any of the sessions, it will give you more clarity. Okay, and this is alongside asking your queries, from me. uh, that uh, rom Okay, there is some query. I will not take the queries now. Okay, now I'm going to share the stage with the shepherds. So let me pick up 4 people randomly. Let me open your batch student list. Okay, so this is what B.Tech CS. Uh, who's there? Whose name should I pick? Shashwat Pandey. Is Shashwat Pandey there? You can unmute and say yes.
Yes.
Okay, Shashwat is one of the shepherd. Um, who else? Okay, okay. This is CS1, right? So it is up to roll number 40 only, right? Okay, so let me go up. Okay, Nehal. Is Nehal there? You can
Yes,
unmute
sir.
and so you are the second shepherd. Um, maybe let me just pick one more from CS today, and we will pick the rest from one more from there. Karishma Vanwari. Is Karishma there? You have to unmute. I know I'm not looking at chats right now. I'm just looking at your batch list. Yeah, is Karishma Vanwari there?
Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Sir, actually, I'm traveling. I'm facing network issues.
Okay, fine, Karishma. We'll pick someone else.
I'm sorry, sir, for
Gyan.
today.
It's okay. Gyanendra Gupta. Gyanendra Gupta is there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you are the third shepherd. I'll pick one from CSAI. Maybe I'll pick two actually. Uh, Anshul Kashyap. Is Anshul Kashyap there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you are fourth shepherd, and I'll probably pick one more. Uh, Sahil Hussain. Is Sahil Hussain there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Sahil, you are the fifth shepherd for today. So, guys, these are your 5 shepherds, okay, and they are going to conduct today's discussion. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. Uh, okay, can you see my screen? Any one of the shepherds can say.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
So there are some questions written here. You will pick up these questions. So as I said, right, assume that you are sitting on a stage and you are the expert panel, and there is an audience which is
Hmm.
listening to you. And these are the questions that these audience are going to ask you in that particular order. And of course, the audience is open to have cross questioning. So while you are answering a particular question, they are free to stop you and say, "I didn't get this part," or can you please repeat that, or something like that, right? Even if they have some allied query which is not really listed down here, they can still ask those questions, and it is your responsibility, so 5 of you, to resolve it. If I feel that the discussion is going in the wrong direction, I will stop you and I will correct the course. Otherwise, I will simply mute myself and listen. If you are not able to give answer to a particular query, then I will unmute myself. Otherwise, you guys are going to take over everything from here. So the first question is, what is the role of bias? I'm going to mute myself now, and any of the shepherds can start.
I can start
Uh,
with this, sir.
yeah, you go ahead. I can also start if you are not
Okay,
comfortable.
BIOS is a acronym for Basic Input Output System. It is the first thing which starts up after we switch on the power button of a computer. It is responsible for checking and uh, checking the input output systems of our computer, which are used to manipulate the hardware. Through in BIOS, we have different settings for boot preference, and BIOS's responsibility is to check the hardware which has been installed and display it to us, like the amount of RAM installed, the processor being used, the clock of the process, clock speed of the processor or the RAM, and different kind of memory devices which are already plugged in, the network connections.
So other
BIOS,
shepherds can weigh in any point of time. Okay, I mean you are free to weigh in whenever you want.
yes, anyone else?
BIOS is the first program that runs, and it runs from the ROM, not the RAM. And it, as Shashwat said, it checks the hardware for any problems, and that test is called POST, power on self test. And it has the boot order sequence, that is in what order the disks are checked for a bootable sector. Okay, someone else.
If there is any issue in the in POST test checkup, then it shows some errors like you have to connect mouse or keyboard like something input devices.
It's a question, you have to answer it. Any shepherd can answer it. So Anshul has a question, shepherds, and you are
Yes, you
supposed to
can.
answer.
You can ask us.
Anshul, please repeat the question.
Anshul, are you there? You have to repeat whatever question you had.
Sir, I am just adding some points in the role of BIOS
Okay,
about
fine.
POST.
Fine. So basically, anyone who is having any questions, so your shepherds are discussing something, and now you are supposed to listen to it. And if you have a query related to that, just unmute yourself and ask. Okay. So I guess
Sir,
if yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
sir, every operating system has their different BIOS.
Uh, there is a query, guys. Please try to answer it.
Every operating system has their different BIOS, or everyone works on same BIOS.
No, every operating system has a different. It does not depend on the operating system. BIOS is most of the time it is placed on the motherboard. It is a permanent kind of program which only upgrades after a generation of CPU or something like some a couple of years. It does not update quite often, so it is only present on the ROM, which is the read-only memory.
BIOS is different, but this is also a fact that it doesn't depend on operating system, because BIOS first of all, checks the hardware, and after BIOS, after the system is booted up and it starts, then the operating system comes into play. So it is true that BIOS is different depending on what hardware you are using, but you cannot say that every operating system has a different BIOS. It depends on hardware.
Yeah, perfectly put. That is.
Yes, it is independent of the OS because it is the one which comes before all of those things. It's the first thing that executes, so it's independent of OS.
Yes, like BIOS, it is generally be executable by the ROM, not the RAM. So maybe you can say that BIOS depends, it increases or upgrade when motherboard is changed or something like that.
Anukul, you have to just unmute and ask. That will be much better. So I will ask on behalf of Anukul. So he is asking the query: does BIOS also verifies your system outputs as well?
Yes.
It checks both the input and output hardware. So yes, the hardware aspect that if the system is connected to all the hardware, including output. So yes.
like its
The
name,
output.
BIOS full form is basic input output system. So I think that it also verifies for system output as well.
Output most probably will be in two ways. One is through the monitor, which if you see any output, you will be able to view it on the monitor if there is an output by the BIOS. And the another kind of output is when there is a hardware error, like if the RAM is not placed well on the slot, or if some component is not recognized or is partially recognized, then there'll be some kind of light code. I mean, three or four lights will be blinking, or there'll be a beeping sound with different spaces, intervals between them, which every kind of code will signify a different kind of error. You can look individual errors for a particular BIOS.
Sir, one more query I do have. If the BIOS check for all the output devices, then if my whole system is connected, and what will just disconnect the monitor from it, will the things be executed again, or it will show some error?
So would any shepherd like to ask this, or shall I answer it?
There should be an error. There should be beeping. If the beeping if the speaker is connected, that is.
No, the motherboards have a tiny speaker which can only perform beeps. So that it is
Oh, okay.
the codes
Nice.
are sent through those.
Yeah, so let me just like let for the audience, what was really the question, that once the system has booted, then you disconnect the monitor, then what happens? Is this the question?
Yes, yes, sir. That is
Yeah.
the question. The
So
monitor thing is you can use the BIOS even without the monitor if it is a code
yes,
line BIOS.
yes. So
But
basically, it's like this. Um,
Okay.
the actual devices that your system requires to boot does not actually include a monitor. Okay, it requires a keyboard, it requires a RAM. Um, then I'm not sure. So this is something that is typically related to hardware. I'm not really a hardware expert, but at least you need a RAM and a keyboard. These are the minimum things that you require. Your system can boot without an output device. Okay, an output device can actually be added to it later. But let us come back to the question. And let's say when you booted your system, at that time there was a monitor. Let's say you plug it out. See, the BIOS only, you can actually plug out anything after your system has booted. Okay, BIOS is not going to return back to the scene. BIOS will only load your operating system, and then it will say bye bye. Okay, so then from there onward, everything is handled by your operating system. So your operating system, if the device that you have just plugged out, if it is necessary for your your system to run, your operating system will have some mechanism to show it to you. Okay, if you do not have a monitor, then probably you don't have any way to view it. The operating system will have the warning, but probably you cannot view it. Similarly, once your system has booted, you can take out your keyboard. Okay, it doesn't mean that your operating system knows that there is no keyboard, and it can probably show you a kind of pop-up saying that there is no keyboard or whatever it is. But it depends on the operating system.
Sir,
But
you said that it requires the BIOS, but the BIOS and the RAM. Sir, a RAM or a ROM?
No, no, no. So ROM is anyhow, it is soldered on your motherboard. Okay, you cannot actually remove it. In order to remove it, you'll need a soldering iron. The
No, sir.
only thing, yeah, the only things
No,
that
sir.
you can, yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I was asking when this BIOS starts its process, you
Mm-hmm.
said in the video you made that it requires ROM for the initial
Mm-hmm.
process, and
Yeah.
that after that the CPU starts working and
Mm-hmm.
it loads the further process in the RAM.
See, the CPU starts working the moment you switch it on. Okay, CPU is the place where your execution takes place. So the CPU starts working straight away. What CPU executes, that is different. Okay, in the beginning, there is no guarantee that your system even has a RAM or not. Okay, it is a possibility that your system does not have any RAM. Why? Because on motherboard there is a pluggable place. Okay, it's like a you know uh, a slot where you simply put your RAM. Okay, it is possible to take out that RAM. Your system will still start. Okay, it's not like your system will not start without a RAM. So what happens is, in the beginning there is no guarantee that there will be a RAM. So what happens is, the initial instructions, the first instructions that your system executes, that is from a ROM, a read only memory, which is soldered to your motherboard. Okay, so that has to be there. This is the idea, that RAM will always be there. RAM may or may not be there. So what happens is, the first set of instructions are executed from your ROM, and they are the instructions which do a number of tests. Okay, they'll basically have a look at your complete hardware. Now, one of the tests that your BIOS will do is whether there is a RAM or not. If there is no RAM, modern computers cannot run without a RAM. So it will start beeping. Okay, there is a small speaker on the same motherboard. Okay, so your BIOS can activate that speaker, and it will probably give you some kind of beeps. So this beep, again, I know, because there is no guarantee that you have a monitor. That is why you have that beeping system. The beep is a kind of feedback. It is telling you that there is no RAM. Now once and similarly, it will check for other things, like, so for instance, it will check if you have a bootable device or not. Okay, what is a bootable device? In fact, I should probably add it here. That is a good question to talk about. The second question is, what are bootable devices? That is the second question, let us say. So this is the second test that it might actually do, and once it has done all the tests, it says, it feels that your system is in a running condition. Then from there onwards, your RAM comes into picture. Your RAM should have some program, right? Because that is where your program counter will point to. Wait, your program counter will point to some address in your RAM. That is what we discussed, right? That essentially you have a program, let us say 4 or 5 instructions, and I point my program counter to the first address of the program. So if I have right, so then how does it happen, right? How does your first program gets loaded in the RAM? Someone has to load it, right? So who loads it? This is the part of your BIOS. Okay, your BIOS makes sure that a small program, this is not a large program, a very small program, gets loaded in your RAM, and from there onwards your execution mode changes. From there you can simply start executing from RAM. It doesn't go back. Okay, the work of BIOS is done and dusted. There is no way your BIOS is going to be recalled once your system has started. So the BIOS execute once and only once. Okay, okay.
Sir, I
So
would like to add something here. Some questions have been asked over here. Like,
good.
is keyboard necessary, or is mouse is mouse necessary? Can we do without a keyboard? So some BIOSes are designed to accept mouse and keyboard both as an input. Primitive BIOSes did not have mouse support. So if you have a modern BIOS, then mouse will also work. And virtual keyboard, that also depends. If your BIOS has a virtual keyboard, then it will work with only a mouse. If it doesn't have a
But a
virtual keyboard,
virtual keyboard actually needs the monitor too. I mean, that is where it will show.
yes, that is necessary to use. And another analogy which about BIOS and ROM and CMOS we can take, which is present within in the computer system only, is like we can think of BIOS as the operating system for the motherboard, and the CMOS becomes the hard drive for the motherboard, which is a battery powered system, and the ROM is the RAM for the motherboard. Like the motherboard can run on its own, but you cannot use most of its functionalities without an operating system. So from the CMOS memory stores the settings and the different softwares which need to be run after powering it on.
The boot order sequence.
Yes, the boot order sequence. Yeah, that is used later on, but the BIOS is part of. I think it is stored in CMOS. When we start it on, it loads onto the ROM, and the ROM is used to run BIOS.
Okay, I
No,
don't know if this is
no, ROM is never loaded actually.
No, sir,
ROM,
it is loaded onto the ROM, sir. That was what I said.
ROM is already there. It's like
yeah,
that
yeah.
nothing needs
No,
to be
the
loaded there because it's permanent.
No, the BIOS is loaded onto the ROM.
It has always been on the ROM.
Yeah. So it's like
So
this. The BIOS is basically the content of your ROM is the BIOS. Okay.
Yes, but it is not always in use. But
it
only
needs to
when
be
we
activated, you mean?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so this is where what happens. So essentially what happens is your hardware manufacturer. So for example, if you have an Intel processor, it will actually come with what is known as an Intel chipset, okay, and an Intel motherboard. So what happens is this is all these things are done at the hardware level. That it is the responsibility of Intel, for example, to make sure that as soon as you power on your system, whatever is stored in the ROM is executed by the Intel processor. This is the responsibility of Intel. How do they do that? That we really don't know. We don't care actually, right? I mean, the only idea is that Intel makes sure that whatever is the content of ROM that gets executed. What you use CMOS for is something like this. When you run a program, there you can actually have variables, right, in a program. So basically, in the last example that we saw, I'm just telling you, Sudeep. So in the last example that we saw that we were adding 8 and 13, right? So you can understand that the actual addition program was exactly the same. It doesn't matter whether you were adding 8 and 13 or whether you were adding 13 and 24 or 46 and 48. At the end of the day, they were just two memory locations. So, whatever was the content of that particular memory location, that was added by your CPU. Okay, the CPU did not care if it is 8 and 13. It could have been anything. So the same thing is there with any program. So what we use for so because ROM is nichel. Okay, I thought someone raised hand. So what happens is ROM is, as I said, it's permanent. You don't it doesn't get changed. So the instructions are exactly the same. What can change is what is the content of a particular location, okay, where there can be a data. The data item can be, as I said, 8 and 13 or 24 and 36. So that data items that can actually be fetched from something known as CMOS battery. So CMOS battery is actually writable. You can actually write something in a CMOS battery, and you not too much, but something. And what happens is what usually this CMOS battery contains is certain small preferences that you can make in your BIOS setup. So when your system boots up, there is a setup that you can go into, and you can change certain settings there. They are not. It's not like they are not. Settings where you can go and type 2 lines or 5 lines of text. No, they are always simple settings. So basically you choose one out of n options, and or you just reorder the options in some other way. So basically this is very small amount of data, and that data is stored in CMOS. So what happens is your BIOS is basically a program that resides inside the ROM, and this program never changes. It's the same. It is possible that in order to run this program, there are some parameters, some data that it requires. That data might change, and that is stored in CMOS. Okay, is that clearer now? What is the difference between Sahil is raising hand? Okay, sorry. So this is the difference between BIOS and CMOS. Okay, BIOS is a program. It requires maybe some inputs to run, and those inputs can vary, and we can store those inputs in the CMOS battery. Any is it clear now? Whomsoever asked, who was asked? Sudeep, is it clear? Sudeep Srivastava,
Yes, sir.
is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
I
So
have a
Excuse me,
question.
sir.
yeah, go ahead. Somebody's asking. I am not going to answer. Your shepherds will. I just
No,
came
no,
in between.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. I don't know if this is a valid question, but I wanted to ask that, as sir said that when you power on the BIOS starts boot up and eventually it will not go back if you like take out the monitor or the keyboard. But if you after that boot up, if you close directly cut out the power supply, so will the program run again, or it will be like that only?
Can anyone answer, or shall I answer this? Any of the shepherds?
Could you repeat your question? I didn't exactly understand what you're asking.
I said that sir said that when you power on the system, the first thing is the BIOS starts running its program, and like after it boots up, there is no problem if you take out the monitor or the keyboard. The program has booted up, and it will not affect the like it will not go back to the original state. So if you directly cut the power supply of the whole system, then after switching on, will it be the same as before, or will it boot up again?
If you cut off the power supply, then that means it is powered off. So when you will connect it again, it will boot up again, which means BIOS will run again. So it will run again.
That's right. I think Nehal is right. When you cut the power off, then again when you on, it will boot up again. Or if any hardware part you, then it be again sound uh, the other one said. I think.
Sahil, you are not that well audible actually.
Okay, sir. Sir,
It's
Excuse me,
okay.
sir.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, Nehal is right. So go ahead with the next question.
Sir, can I ask a question? I mean, I'm a shepherd.
Oh yeah, sure. You can ask the questions to the other shepherds as well. If they are not able to answer, then I will answer.
Sir, my question is, I mean, what is warm booting and cold booting?
This is out of our reach for this discussion. You can probably ask this to me over email.
Okay, sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. You can answer. You can ask.
The boot sequence order.
Yes, the boot sequence
Yes.
order can be changed in BIOS.
Yes, I
Will
mean, the
anybody
boot
else
sequence order
elaborate?
can be changed. Like, I mean, the PPT that sir shared, it had, I mean, steps for installation of Linux. And when we install Linux, like on the host system, then in fact, we have to change the boot sequence order, because it may so happen that in the boot sequence, the first thing is hard drive, and it has, the Windows thing. So it will load up the Windows thing, even if you have that pen drive that contains the Linux ISO file. So in that case, you will have to change the boot sequence order if you have to, use Linux as your host.
And that order will be saved in the CMOS, because BIOS that can't be changed, but CMOS has the actual order which is used by the BIOS. So the changes will be there and will be reflected in the CMOS, and that will be used by BIOS to actually do the thing, but the order is stored in CMOS.
sir, am I audible, sir?
No, Sahil, you are not. I mean, the audio is like volume is very low. So anyhow, I guess we can move to the next question. We have already taken a lot of time. So let's move to the question on what are bootable devices. Yeah, the shepherds are supposed to answer this query.
So a bootable device, devices are have sectors. A bootable device is one that has a boot sector. Now, what a boot sector means that the first sector of the device should contain a code maybe some binary code, which loads the operating system. It is something called as an initial program, which then loads another program, and in this way, the whole operating system is loaded. So, devices that have a boot sector are called bootable devices. Any of you may continue, other shepherds.
There are several types of bootable devices. A bootable device can be anything which has capacity to store something permanently, like a pen drive, a hard drive, CD, DVD, some network storage. So, but the boot sector has to be present in the first section of the drive, so that the BIOS, when it is searching for a boot drive, it can locate that, it can identify that this drive is capable of booting into an OS or the installation of an OS, and then it will pass on the command or execute the command which is present in the boot sector. And then the control is handed over to the operating system, and the operating system boots up, or the setup of an operating system starts from there.
Anyone has any queries, please ask about bootable devices, boot sectors, whatever it is.
Sir, I have a query.
Sir, Sahil has asked a question.
Just a minute. So, so after we switch off the power, we have to write. No. Your bias is exactly the same. So it's like this. This is why it is at the hardware level. Even if you do an improper shutdown, that is what somebody asked, right? That we simply removed the power. That is known as an improper shutdown. Even after that, whenever your system gets power, the same process repeats. The bias starts from exactly the same place, okay, and this exactly the same uh, content is executed, the same content, okay, every time you switch. This is what you have to understand. This is at the level of hardware, right? So as soon as uh, current starts flowing in your system, there is a specific sequence that takes place, okay, and that sequence is bias. So you know, current doesn't have memory. So as soon as you switch it off and you switch it on again, it basically starts from the same place. Is that what you were asking, Sahil? I'm a bit confused.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, he was asking that. So,
Yeah. Okay.
So
but
I have
sir, it
another
is possible
question.
to ruin the BIOS, because
Um.
the BIOS
So
updates do take place. Like if
yes,
we
yes,
if
yes.
we
So what
if there is
happens
a
is,
generational update in the
yes,
CPU,
yes,
if
yes.
you are changing the CPU,
So it's
so
like this. The bias updates are very rare, and that is why I did not actually want to go in that direction. So it is something known as
okay.
flashing. Flashing
Yes.
is a different process than your
It
normal.
is similar to if somebody has rooted their Android phone, and when they are changing the OS, like version of Android by rooting it, when you flash a new OS onto the
Yeah.
Android phone,
So
similar
actually,
kind of issues
the
can
issue is
take
something
place.
like this. Like ROM, when we say ROM, it only means, it doesn't really mean that it is actually read only. I mean, you can write it. It's just that the process that we use for writing to a typical memory element is not the same as writing to a ROM. And usually ROMs have some number of writes on that, right? I mean, they actually degrade after every write. So the hardware itself starts degrading. So it's like, if you keep on flashing your ROM every day or 10 times a day, maybe your ROM will go bad in probably a month itself, okay. And that is why you should not flash your RAM so often, because it degrades your hardware, okay. The technology for ROMs is different. But as I said, ROMs are usually meant for reading only. So you store data on them for once, and then you keep on reading them as many times as you want. Reading is not a problem. Writing, you can reprogram them, you can rewrite over them, but this has to be done extremely rarely, very rarely if possible. This is this your question? I mean, and by the way, the question that someone asked, can an improper shutdown corrupt your ROM? 99.99% of times no. But then again, it is an electronic component, you can never say it is because electronic components are all uh, susceptible to stuff like magnetic fields, okay, electric fields, all those things. You really don't know what electric, magnetic and stuff like that field is there. So it is in 99.99% of cases, I would say an improper shutdown will have no effect on ROM. But as I said, you can never be 100% sure. It's because if it does get affected, it will be because of some other reason, right? It would be, as I said, some magnetic and electric field going in some. There is some weird combination of it, and that actually corrupts your hardware. But otherwise, the content of your ROM cannot be changed.
Sir, the only way I'm aware of corrupting a ROM is while updating the ROM, if we do an improper shutdown,
Yes.
then the ROM gets
Yeah,
corrupted.
so essentially it's like this, right? So you're writing something on the ROM, and in between the power goes off.
Yes,
So
only
then
then.
so then the write was not complete. Then of course, it's like it's a 10 statement program, and you only have 5 statements on the ROM. So then what will happen? And even in those cases, usually if you can simply find a way to reprogram the whole thing, right? If you can rewrite, if you can simply reflash your ROM, it should work. Okay, I'm not a hardware expert, I'm not an electronics engineer, but from what I understand, that is the only problem. That is not really corruption, that's basically incomplete flashing, and incomplete flashing would anyhow be bad. So yeah, Nehal, you had a query. I started answering.
Yes, sir. Yes, I was asking that whenever like the light goes and the UPS is not working, so there's an improper shutdown. So then when we restart the system, it often tells us that it did not shut down correctly and press this key to start it normally or something like that.
Yeah.
So, sir, how does is it the BIOS does not know how it was shut down? So how did the computer know that the previous shutdown was not proper? Is that the
That was, yeah,
OS?
yeah, yes. So that is the
Okay.
answer. The bias is not the component that knows if your shutdown was proper or not. It is the OS.
Mm.
Okay. So when you shut
Okay,
down
sir.
your OS properly, there are certain cleanup acts that it performs on your hard drive, for
Mhm.
example. And when you reboot your operating system, it should expect that same state of your hard drive. If that hard drive
Okay.
is in a different state, your operating system can figure out that the last shutdown was improper, and then that is why sometimes you will see that there is a I may have to run a, your operating system will say I may have to run a check on your hard drive to see.
Yes.
And what the reason for this is, let us say it was writing something on the disk, and at the same time, the same thing as with ROM. So let us say I have a file, and this file had, let us say, 4 bytes. I wrote 2 bytes on the disk, and then the power failed. So that file is in some kind of inconsistent state. uh, this can be at an even lower level. I was writing a sector, and something failed, right? So that is what you call a bad sector. Sometimes your uh, your
Okay.
your hard drive might actually develop bad sectors if the read and write that was happening over them was improper. Something happened in between, so you can develop bad sectors on your hard drives. So this is another problem.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
Sir,
let
am I now audible?
much better.
Sir, may I ask a question?
Yeah,
Am I
sure.
support on you? Sir, I was asking just when I shut down my laptop, then if a system or a program is running in background, it
You are
shows me.
inaudible again, Sahil.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, Sahil. I mean, can you okay, just type it on the chat. I will try to answer it. Um, keep on typing. I will reply back to you on the chat itself. Let's move on to the next question. Is everything clear about boot sector? Do you understand what is the difference between a boot sector and a bootable device, and how are they connected? If you guys have any queries, please ask your shepherds now.
I have a question. If we create a bootable device like a pen drive, can we still use that pen drive for regular use, like storing files, or is that pen drive permanently fixed as a bootable device?
Should I
I
answer
think you
this?
can use it for other things since only a sector is the boot sector. The rest of the pen drive is free. for you to use as you want.
Sir, can I answer?
Yeah, you answer.
Sir, once you boot, you can't use it for storing any data. For booting, you have to format your entire pen drive. So for using it again, you have to unboot your pen drive.
No. So
No,
it's
no,
like this, guys.
sir, I can answer this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, uh, the boot device has to be prepared first. Like the boot sector has to be prepared. When we install an operating system for the first time, if you have multiple hard drives connected, so it asks which hard drive do you want to prepare for as a bootable hard drive. And that hard drive is formatted completely for the first time because the first portion of the hard drive needs to be cleared out and for the bootable sector. And similar is the case when we use a external hard drive, a CD or a pen drive. But once the bootable sector has been prepared and the OS has been installed, the other portions can be used to store. So was I correct? Was I correct in this?
Yes. So basically, the idea is something like this. You should avoid storing something else on a bootable pen drive, but that doesn't mean that if you do, it will become unbootable. Okay, so this is, let me tell you the best way to do this is something like this. um, your file system has a way of managing file, okay, of a way of managing your data, right? And this thing is actually transparent to you. You really don't know what data is stored where on your hard drive, okay, what sector is being used to store what part of a file. This is up to your file system. So the only thing that you require for a particular pen drive to be bootable is that the first sector has a special program, and that program is the booting program. We call it the bootloader. But what happens is, if you start using it like a regular pen drive, um, if you are adding more data to it, if you are removing data from it, at some point of time, there is something known as defragment. So it is possible that your operating system actually starts reshuffling the content of your disk. Okay, so certain files are taken away from one point to another. This is completely oblivious to you. You don't really know something like this is happening. So it is possible that at some point of time, the boot sector actually gets overwritten, because it's not like the content of the boot sector will go away. It is possible that in your file system, because the file system doesn't really know that this is a bootable sector, so it might actually copy the content of that sector to some other place, okay, on your hard drive, on your pen drive, and then it becomes non-bootable. So this is the idea. You can use a disk that is bootable for storing other data as well, but then there is a risk. Okay, there is a risk that over a period of time, if you keep on reading writing over that disk, at some point of time, that bootable sector gets replaced with some other data, and then it will become unbootable. Okay, so is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
I
I
have
in the
a
mean
little bit doubt on boot sector.
yeah.
How from bootable device?
Yeah, let ask this to your shepherds. I just unmuted myself. So ask this to your shepherds.
Yeah, was my question audible that how is boot sector different from a bootable device? Like, what is the role of boot sector?
So the bootable device has different sectors, and the first sector that contains the some code is what is called as boot sector. So this is what is the difference.
There are any other sectors also, or is there only one bootable sector?
Anyone?
The boot sector is the first sector. So
I'm asking that are there any other sectors also, or this is the only sector?
there are many sectors,
There
of
are
which
other
boot sector
sectors.
has to be necessarily the first one.
Yeah, so if you guys have any more queries, please unmute and ask, or otherwise we'll move to the next question. Okay, so I assume that boot sector thing is now clear. So let me just summarize it in 30 seconds or 1 minute. A boot sector is basically the first sector of your hard drive. Uh, Essentially, the term boot sector means that this sector has a special zeros and one code. Okay, this is not really a data but a program. This program can actually be loaded as the first program in the RAM. Okay, from where this program understands where are the rest of the programs of your operating system lying on the hard drive, and then it loads it from there. So that is the idea of a boot sector. It has to be always the first sector of your drive. It cannot be any other. Your drive can have thousands and millions of sectors, but the first sector, it needs to have a special code, and only then can I call it a bootable device. A bootable device is a device that has the boot sector. Okay, so let us go to the next question. What does the term kernel mean, and how is it different from the term operating? And how is it different from the terms operating system and device drivers?
The kernel is the part of the operating system that directly deals with the hardware, and it contains device drivers. So it's part of the OS, and device drivers are part of the kernel.
The initial program which loads the operating system. In the case of Linux, it is called bootloader, and this bootloader loads what is something known as the Linux kernel. So basically, the Linux kernel is the core of Linux operating system, and if it look at the flow chart, for at the bottom is hardware, then comes operating system, which interacts with the hardware. And in case of Linux, the lower end of the operating system is what is the Linux kernel, and then after that comes different programs that are stored in the kernel. uh, when we talk of the difference between operating system and kernel, uh, or difference between device driver and kernel, so kernel contains some programs that talk to and manage hardware devices, and these are called device drivers. So this is what is the difference.
Kernel contains several simple codes which are used by the OS to conduct complicated tasks. It is like the kernel contains the BODMAS rule, the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and the OS uses it for all the different kind of operations which are used to perform in maths.
Is it possible to change the kernel or modify it?
It is possible only in open source operating systems, but even Linux, I think it is restricted on Linux. Only the
Okay, this is a very interesting question, so I'm just unmuting. Sorry, the Shepherds.
yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, it's like this. You can actually change kernels of, let's say, Linux operating system, but you'll have to rebuild everything, and that is a very complicated process. Building a kernel. But once the kernel has been built, okay, built as in it is ready to use, then you cannot modify it. Okay, the kernel has a way to modify itself, update itself, but you cannot specifically modify it. Okay, so this is the answer. You can, of course, before using a kernel, you can download the programs that are there. So those programs are publicly available. If you want to change some of those programs, you can certainly do that. But you don't really change. There are certain things, there are certain n number of ways in which you can actually screw up your kernel. So a kernel depends on so many data files. So you can actually go and screw up a data file, and then your kernel will stop working. But the actual core of your kernel does not change. In order to do that, you have to rebuild your kernel. and that is a different, very complicated process. Any other queries related to? Yes, there is some query on the change. Since it has access to hardware, it is restricted to change. So kernel basically, so it's like saying, uh, so it is the same problem as saying that who can actually change you, right? Can someone else change you? We are at that kind of question. Whether you want to change or not, that is the that is the idea. So if you do not want to change, then no one else can change you. So this is the issue, that kernel is basically the core, that is that, whatever programs you write, okay, they actually use kernel. So if you direct kernel to change itself, whether it will change itself or not, that is a very complex query. And that is what I'm saying, that there are ways to perform configurations. Okay, so there are certain configuration settings that you can change. um, and these configuration settings are basically in files. Okay, and that is why I said that there are so many files that are there, which with the help of which you can mess up your computer. Not exactly the kernel, but yes, you can mess up the kernel. But when we say the actual code of the kernel that runs, you cannot change that. If you want to change the code, then you'll have to go and download the kernel files and make the changes at the source code level and rebuild it. So it is a very advanced question. Let's for now just assume that kernel cannot be changed. It remains exactly as it is. There is no way to change the kernel.
Sir, as Gyanendra Gupta and Nehal Sharma talking about shell, I'm not able to understand what is shell.
Okay, so shell is basically so it's like this. The next lecture that is there, that talks about shell in more detail, but and we will be discussing it tomorrow. But the idea is, what happens is, your Linux kernel is a very primitive, it consists of a primitive level of programs. They actually cannot do much for you, from the perspective of using the computer. In order to use your computer, you have to interact with the kernel, right? Because the kernel is the layer that is sitting between you and the hardware. But how do you interact with the kernel? So what happens is, kernel actually has certain, let us say, um, imagine you are on a railway station. If you want to interact with the railway staff, how do they interact with you? So they have these small windows, right? These inquiry windows and these reservation windows. The only way you can interact with the railways is through these small windows. So what happens is, kernel also has some small windows open for you. Okay, if you want to interact with the kernel, this is the mechanism, and this mechanism is known as system calls. Okay, so there is a specific way you can interact with the kernel. And if you want to use kernel for anything, if you want to, if you, let us say, if you want to ask the kernel, please, get one character of input from keyboard, there is a way to do that. So there is a system call to do that. So you ask your kernel to basically take some input, the kernel takes it for you and gives it to you. So what happens is, this interface, so you can understand that the kernel is at a very low level. It only has those windows. Okay, it doesn't have a direct way of being manipulated. It only has those reservation counter windows. Now you can either walk up to the reservation counter window on your own, or you can hire an agent. Okay, you pay the money to the agent goes to the reservation counter, gets your ticket and gets it back for you. So this agent is shell. Okay, a shell is basically a higher level program through which you can talk to your kernel. Okay, so you basically give um, you give some set of commands to the shell, and these commands somehow know how to talk to the kernel. They actually understand the language of kernel. So you understand this, kernel knows the language of hardware, and shell knows the language of kernel. Okay, and so usually we don't talk to the kernel directly, we talk to the shell talks to the kernel.
Sir, this shell, is it that same shell that we use in Linux?
Yeah.
Or
The shell. Basically whatever you type. So some of you have, for example, installed Ubuntu server, right? And when you boot up your virtual machine, some black color window comes up, which looks very similar to your Windows command prompt. Whatever you type there, okay, that shell itself. We call that shell. The shell is another program, okay, which is running on top of your kernel, and you interact with the shell. And how do you interact with the shell? You give it commands, okay. You type something on your keyboard, you give a command to the shell interprets your command, and it figures out what you want to do, okay. Then whatever you want to do, it translates this in the language of kernel, okay. So kernel only understands a certain type of language. It requires uh, some kind of system call level and understanding. So what happens is your shell basically translates your queries in terms of system calls. Then it asks kernel to perform those system calls. Kernel will perform the system calls and give back the results, and your shell will interpret those results and show it to you. So that is why there are many layers, okay, where your computer works in multiple layers. The bottom of the layer is transistors. With the help of transistors you make one bit, okay. With the help of one bit you make bytes. With the help of bytes you make memories. With the help of memories, uh, you make something else. So there is a level of abstraction. So shell is something that sits over your kernel, and you interact with the shell. The shell knows the language of the kernel, and it talks to the kernel and get your tasks done. So in theory, everything can be done by using a shell, but people also prefer to have something more than shell. There's what is known as a desktop.
so, sir, if I'm using a shell to create a new file, and I can also use the operating system GUI to create a file. So, is it like that? When I'm using shell, I'm directly talking to the shell, and when I'm using the operating system talks to the shell.
So first of all, the term operating system is essentially, you know, operating system is just a collection of programs, okay, and those programs can either be shells or they can be something other than shells. So it's like this: if you want to create your own window application, okay, something that takes input through keyboard as well as mouse, what is it that you need to do? You can either directly make system calls, okay. If you are making system calls, then shell doesn't come into picture. You are creating a software tool that understands what system calls are to be used, and you simply use those system calls to get your task done. Another way to do the same thing is that you basically start using the commands that shell provides you, okay. So shell has its own language. It's like this, as I gave you the example, you can either walk up to the reservation counter and get your tickets directly from the counter, or you give money to uh, uh, a a an agent on the railway station who does it for you. You can even say that I'm not even going to the railway station. I will talk to some travel agency. And so basically maybe travel agency is like a desktop. I'm just trying to find out some weird ways to explain it. But basically, kernel is the one that directly manages the hardware. So railways are the guys who are going to run the trains. Uh, the way you have to interact with them is there are windows, okay, on the railway station. You have to talk to them through those windows. You can either go and directly talk to them, in which case you are building a tool that uses system calls. Your tool could again be a command line based tool that takes only input via keyboard, or it could be a tool that takes input through mouse as well as keyboard. It's up to you, right? At the end of the day, you have to somehow interact with the kernel. You can either do it directly if you understand what system calls are, or you use another program you know that takes your input and then passes it on to kernel.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I'm not sure how much I was able to explain. I just tried to find out the railways.
No, sir. You completely explained. It's
Right.
clear now. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. So we are already out of time today. I have it's becoming a habit of me to take up someone else's time. What we'll do is we'll continue our discussion from where we are leaving it today. Tomorrow we will of course add more stuff to these questions. We will add more questions from the second lecture as well. So we'll just keep on adding to this list. I think we have partially discussed question 3 today. We will have like 4, question 5 and question 6 and stuff like that. So we will continue our discussion tomorrow. And by the way,
One last doubt.
go ahead.
Sir, till now the bias was doing things with the for from the ROM, sir. Now how the shift has happened to RAM, sir?
Okay. So this is basically a kind of it's an advanced thing at the hardware level. So what happens is something like this. Exactly where from certain things are read and written. At the end of the day, data is flowing on buses, right? I mean, you have wires. These wires can either go to point A or they can either go to point B. Now, exactly from where this data is coming, whether it is from point A or point B, this is a hardware level decision. Okay, so you use uh, let's say, the easiest way to understand is I have a boolean variable which can take two values, zeros and ones, and let us say at hardware level I have a way to represent this boolean variable. If this boolean variable is 0, I take input from one set of wires. If the boolean variable is 1, I take input from another set of wires. And all I have to do now is to make this switch is keep it either 0 or 1. At the start of the system, by default, let us say the value is 0, so I keep on taking, so one set of wire is activated, and at the end of, let us say, a process, a program flips this bit from 0 to 1. So from here onwards the other set of wires are executing. Am I making sense? So essentially you basically do it at the hardware. This is why this task is done by your hardware manufacturer. Intel has the program which can do this hardware level manipulation. Is it clear, or do I need to explain it better?
Sir, it's clear.
Okay. So the idea is that you do this at the hardware level. At the hardware level, I can basically say there are two sets of wires coming to the CPU. Which of the two set of wires shall I use to read an instruction? Should it be set A or set B? And this can probably be done with the help of a bit. If that bit is 0, one set of, so you will study something known as encoders and decoders when you study computer organization. If you are very interested, please go and read it today itself. There is something known as encoders and decoders. So your encoders and decoders are used to do this. So please read what an encoder and decoder is if you are really interested. But you may not understand it. This is why I'm not explaining it in the class. So guys, I mean, I have overshot my time again. Sorry. But we will, so this was just your first experience with shepherding. I hope you guys become more experts in this kind of discussion mode. It will take some time. Sorry, but you'll understand that this is a much better way of learning. Okay. Even if you have a silly question in your mind, instead of asking it to me, you can probably ask it to your friend, and this way you will learn more. I'm just trying. I don't know whether it is better than simple lecturing or not, but I at least want to try this mode. I hope that you guys will learn more. So uh, there is some chat going on which I have not no I have no idea what is happening there. But this is what I want, really, right? Whether it happens over chat or whether it happens over audio, it doesn't matter. Whatever is happening in the chat is what I want. You guys keep on questioning each other, and you guys keep on answering each other. I will try my best that no one gets the wrong answers, but this is the idea. Discuss among yourself. I'm only a teacher and I have limitations. I have so many students, 240 students, and only 3 hours of time, 3 plus 3 6 hours of time in a week. So I have my limitations. I cannot probably tell you everything that I want to tell you. uh, and that is why I know probably whatever I'm teaching right now is not even a part of your course. I'm just doing it so that you have a better understanding of how your computer works, so that when we start programming you can appreciate what you are doing. Okay. So anyone has any questions, any feedback? We already have 1 week of teaching done. So if you have any queries, any comments or feedback, uh, please do tell me. And we will try to keep on improving ourselves, and we'll see how you can learn. This is the overall
Sir, the class we enjoy the most is yours as of now.
idea. Thank you. And the idea is that if you enjoy it, you'll learn more, right? I mean,
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
this shepherding model will definitely work better than the other ones. It involves more thinking.
right. And this is the idea, because what will happen is some of you will have extremely silly queries, right? That you will probably feel that maybe it is not worth asking. But in shepherding, this is the idea. You keep on asking as silly stuff. Maybe we don't have enough time for shepherding. 3 hours a week is too little. Um, but even in this hodgepodge, you will at least understand something. And of course, I am always there on email. So please keep on reading, please keep on learning. And no, shepherds will be different, shepherds will be different, yes. So in the previous lecture, what happened was I had 4 people who volunteered to shepherd for tomorrow. Okay, they were so happy. Are there any people here who would volunteer for tomorrow, not the ones today? Anyone who would like to volunteer as a shepherd for tomorrow? Or I will just pick you. I will pick at least one shepherd randomly so that everyone reads. Okay. But okay, Nikhil Verma. Nikhil, do you want to be a shepherd tomorrow?
Yes, sir. I will be the shepherd for the
So
tomorrow.
one is Nikhil. Anyone else who would like to be a shepherd? I will pick. You see, it's like this. I will pick at least one, so that there is a probability, even though it's a small probability, but that probability is not zero. That you can be picked. So you have to study. Um, but I was so happy that in the previous batch, people wanted to be a shepherd, because you understand, right? The shepherd learns the most, um, because he or she will be bombarded with queries. So that person learns the most. So yes, shepherding is the best way to learn. So Nikhil is one. Anyone else?
I want to. I can try at least.
Uddhav, is it? Uddhav and
Arun
Arush.
Pawar. Yes, sir.
Arush. Uddhav, would you also like to be a shepherd? Okay, thank you. So we have at least two, Nikhil and Arush. Okay. We have two shepherds. Anyone else would like to do shepherding voluntarily? I'll pick at least one from my side. So there are two more slots left. Pranav, you would like to be a shepherd? And Savalia. So you can just unmute and say, I would like to be the shepherd.
Yes,
I guess.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I want to.
Okay. So Pranav and Savalia and Nikhil and Arush. These are the 4 shepherds for tomorrow. I will pick one more at random tomorrow itself. Okay. I hope you guys learned something, and let's hope something
Sir,
happens.
I have a doubt.
Go ahead.
Sir, the different distributions of Linux are made for different uses, right?
Made for?
Different purposes. Like I installed Kali Linux today,
Mm-hmm.
and it has things like password attacks, wireless attacks.
Oh, use cases. Yeah. So I mean, don't worry much about it, right? Use any version of Linux as of now. Okay, you are probably at much, you are at a much basic level right now. Don't worry about it. Just pick some Linux version, okay, and that should be fine. It should have Bash in it. That is the only thing that you have to understand. It should have Bash in it, and okay, I think I have the slots filled right now, so we will see what we can do tomorrow. Okay, I'm getting some more queries, about shepherding. So let's see. uh, so we'll see it. We have 4 shepherds already. We'll see who's going to be the 5th shepherd tomorrow. Okay, and thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the session today. We will keep on having these sessions now. In every week, you have to study what I give you. You can ask or bug me as much as you want before the lecture, and during the lecture, you have to discuss. Okay, and
I had a problem with the virtual box also, so I will mail it to you.
yeah, sure. Send. I have received like hundreds of emails in the past 3 days about
Okay.
VirtualBox. So, and I have
Okay,
tried to
okay.
answer to everyone.
Actually,
I
sir, I have downloaded that Ubuntu 20.0.4, but it wasn't running in my
yeah. So that
laptop.
seems to be the theme of the day. But you can send me an email and we'll check what it is.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Sir, you should.
Sir,
I want. Abhinav has an announcement to make.
Oh
That
yeah, go ahead.
Stack Overflow one. Announce Abhinay. People are unaware of it yet.
Actually, sir, when we saw that you are being bombarded with questions, and even in the WhatsApp group, many people have doubts related to coding who are trying coding. So it's very difficult to help them. And sometimes, even when I see that someone is asking for help, but the spam that is going on in the WhatsApp group, it's difficult to make them understand. So we decided to create a Stack Overflow Teams. Well, actually, it's different from the normal Stack Overflow because in this, only the batch students will be there who will ask and who will answer. So if any one of you feels that they have a query regarding coding, regarding BIOS, regarding this Linux, or maybe normal questions too, we won't have any strict rules, then you can go and ask your questions there and everyone will try to help. So it's a better platform
Yeah,
for
yeah. So
Q&A.
it's like this. I mean, in the previous batch, uh, I had come up with something known as like study groups or something. So they said, "Sir, we already have too many groups, and we cannot have any more groups." So I simply stopped. Uh, but this is a very good idea. Please, come up with your own ways to learn. Right? I mean, I am trying my best to find out ways in which I can teach. But as I said, I'm severely resource constrained. I can only I am trying my best to keep up with the emails. But as I said, you are right. I mean, maybe at some point in time, I may not be able to answer your emails uh, immediately. So it will probably there will be a lag. So maybe currently, if you send me a question, yeah, sorry, please leave. Sorry, I'm really sorry. Please guys, we'll meet again tomorrow at our regular lecture time. Okay, bye guys, bye.